Let me tell you about a man who had everything and lost the only thing that mattered. His name was Ethan Caldwell, and if you think this is just another sob story about a rich man's regrets, you're wrong. This is about a child who was forgotten, abandoned, and tortured while the world looked away. This is about a father who came back too late, or maybe just in time. Ethan Caldwell built an empire with his bare hands, real estate, millions of dollars, towers of glass and steel that scraped the sky. But you know what? Every single brick, every single contract, every single dollar came at a price. While he was building his kingdom, his family was crumbling. His wife Rachel begged him to come home. His son Noah drew pictures of daddy figures that never had faces. And Ethan, he told himself he was doing it all for them. What a damn lie. The divorce papers came on a Tuesday. Rachel couldn't take it anymore. She was tired of sleeping alone, tired of explaining to their 5-year-old son why daddy missed another birthday, another Christmas, another everything. She took Noah and left for her family's ranch in the small town Ethan had desperately tried to escape. And you know what Ethan did? He let them go. He told himself it was temporary. He told himself he'd fix it later. Always later. 10 years. 10 goddamn years passed like pages in a book he never read. Ethan's empire grew larger, his bank account fatter, his bed colder. Success tasted like ash in his mouth. The penthouse apartment echoed with silence so loud it could drive a man insane. And in his desk drawer, wrapped in tissue paper like a sacred relic, sat a small wooden toy car he'd carved for Noah's 6th birthday. A birthday that came and went without a phone call, without a visit, without a father. The breaking point came on a Sunday morning when Ethan woke up and couldn't remember the sound of his son's laugh. Couldn't remember if Noah's eyes were brown like his mother's or green like his own. The loneliness hit him like a freight train, and for the first time in a decade, the great Ethan Caldwell broke down and sobbed like a child. That's when he made the decision that would change everything. He was going back to that small town, back to face the wreckage of his choices, back to beg for forgiveness from a son who probably didn't even remember him. The drive took 6 hours, but it felt like a lifetime. Every mile brought back memories he'd buried under years of work and whiskey. The wooden toy car sat in his passenger seat like a judgment. As he pulled into the town limits, his hands were shaking. This place looked exactly the same, like time had forgotten it existed. Maybe that was fitting. Time had forgotten a lot of things. The Whitmore Ranch sprawled across the valley like something out of a postcard. White fences, rolling pastures, a big farmhouse with a wraparound porch. It looked perfect. It looked like everything Ethan had never been able to give his family. And standing on that porch, watching him drive up with suspicion and barely concealed hostility, was Mark Whitmore, Rachel's new husband. Mark was everything Ethan wasn't: rugged, present. The kind of man who knew how to fix things with his hands instead of buying new ones. The kind of man who came home for dinner every night. The kind of man who probably tucked Noah into bed and read him stories. The thought made Ethan's stomach turn with jealousy and shame. Well, well, look what the cat dragged in. Mark's voice carried across the yard like a warning shot. He was a big man, broad-shouldered, with calloused hands, and eyes that said he'd rather be anywhere else. Ethan Caldwell, thought you were too important to visit us little people. The words hit like physical blows, but Ethan took them. He deserved everyone. Hello, Mark. I wanted to see Noah. It's been too long. Too long? Mark's laugh was bitter. Try 10 years, you son of a bitch. 10 years without a phone call, without a birthday card, without giving a damn about that boy. Before Ethan could respond, Rachel appeared in the doorway. She looked older, tired. The bright spark that had first attracted him was dimmed, replaced by something harder, something that spoke of too many disappointments and broken promises. Ethan! Her voice was flat, emotionless. "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to see Noah. I know I don't have the right to ask, but you're right. You don't." The words cut deep, but there was something else in her eyes. Something that looked almost like fear. "Noah's not here anyway. He's at a youth retreat, church camp. Won't be back for 2 weeks." It was a lie. Ethan knew it instinctively, the way a parent knows when their child is hiding something. But why would she lie? Where was his son? He looked around the ranch with new eyes. The place was immaculate, well maintained, but something felt wrong. Off. The house was too quiet. There were no toys scattered in the yard, no bicycle leaning against the porch, no signs that a 15-year-old boy lived here at all. And then he noticed something else. There were no photos of Noah visible anywhere, on the porch or through the windows. 2 weeks, Ethan repeated slowly. "And he's doing well. He's fine." Mark's voice was sharp, final. "Now, if you'll excuse us, we have work to do. Some of us have responsibilities." As Ethan turned to leave, defeated and confused, an elderly ranch hand approached him by the fence. The old man's name was Cyrus, and his weathered face told the story of decades spent under the sun. "You're the boy's father," Cyrus said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one was watching. "The real one." "Yes, I'm Ethan Caldwell." Cyrus studied him for a long moment, then leaned closer. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "If you want the truth about where that boy is, check the west barn, tonight, when the house lights go out." The words sent ice through Ethan's veins. "What do you mean? What's wrong?" But Cyrus was already walking away, leaving Ethan standing by the fence with a growing sense of dread that something was terribly, horribly wrong. That night, Ethan parked his rental car a mile down the road and walked back to the ranch through the darkness. His heart was pounding so hard he was sure the whole county could hear it. The main house was dark, peaceful, like a picture from a magazine. But the west barn, there was a faint light coming from inside. He crept closer, every step feeling like a betrayal of trust and a desperate search for truth at the same time. The barn door was slightly ajar, and what he saw inside made his knees buckle. There, in the dim light of a single bare bulb, was Noah. His son, his baby boy who was now 15 years old and so thin it made Ethan's chest ache. Noah was kneeling beside a broken cattle gate, trying to repair it with hands that shook from exhaustion. His clothes were dirty, covered in hay dust and stains. One hand was wrapped in a crude bandage that looked like he'd done it himself. But what broke Ethan's heart completely was the corner of the barn where Noah had clearly been sleeping. A thin blanket, a flat pillow, a makeshift bed in a storage area surrounded by farm equipment and feed sacks. This was where his son lived, in a goddamn barn like an animal. Ethan must have made a sound because Noah's head snapped up. The boy's eyes were wide with fear, and he flinched backward as if expecting a blow. But then recognition dawned, and Noah's expression changed to something even more heartbreaking. Wonder. "Dad!" The word was barely a whisper. You actually came back." Ethan wanted to rush forward, to grab his son and hold him and never let go. But something in Noah's posture, the way he instinctively protected his injured hand, the way he glanced toward the barn door, as if expecting someone to burst in and punish him for talking, it all made Ethan approach slowly, carefully. "Yeah, kiddo, I came back. I'm so sorry I stayed away so long." Noah looked like he wanted to cry but had forgotten how. "I sleep out here because it's quiet. Nobody bothers me here, and I can think." That's when Ethan noticed the notebook beside Noah's makeshift bed. Dozens of pages filled with architectural drawings, houses, beautiful detailed houses with big windows and front porches and gardens. Each one more elaborate than the last. each one labelled with names like Dream Home and Someday House and A Place Where I Belong. You draw houses, Ethan said softly. I want to be an architect, like I thought you were before I found out you just buy and sell buildings. Noah's voice held no accusation, just quiet resignation. I design places where families would be happy. The knife in Ethan's heart twisted deeper. His son dreamed of building homes while sleeping in a barn, dreamed of families while being treated like an unwanted burden. How had this happened? How had he let this happen? Noah, why are you sleeping out here? Where's your room in the house? Something flickered across Noah's face. Fear again. Mark says I need to earn my place. Mom says I'm old enough to contribute. This is better anyway. The house gets loud sometimes. Ethan wanted to kill someone. Specifically, he wanted to find Mark Whitmore and introduce his fist to the bastard's face. But he forced himself to stay calm, to not scare Noah. What kind of work do you do here? Everything. Feed the cattle before school, muck the stalls after, fix fences on weekends. Mark says if I want to eat, I work. Noah said it matter-of-factly, like child labour was perfectly normal. Sometimes I miss school when there's a lot to do, but that's okay. I can teach myself from books. Every word was another nail in Ethan's coffin of guilt and rage. This wasn't discipline. This wasn't teaching responsibility. This was abuse. This was slavery. And it was happening to his son while he lived in luxury, 300 miles away, completely oblivious. Noah, listen to me carefully. This isn't right. None of this is right. It's okay, Dad. Really, I'm used to it. But Noah's voice cracked, betraying the brave front he was trying to maintain. At least you came back. I always wondered if you would. Ethan wanted to grab his son right then and there, wanted to carry him out of that barn and away from this nightmare. But he knew he had to be smart about this. He needed evidence. He needed help. He needed to do this right, or he might never see Noah again. I have to go, but I'm not leaving you. Do you understand? I'm not abandoning you again. I'm going to fix this. Noah nodded, but his eyes said he'd heard promises before. He'd learned not to hope too hard. As Ethan drove away that night, he felt like his chest was going to explode. 15 years old and sleeping in a barn, thin as a rail and working like a farmhand, missing school to fix fences and muck stalls. Where the hell was Child Protective Services? Where were the teachers, the neighbours, the people who should have been watching out for him? The next morning, Ethan drove into town with a purpose. He needed allies. He needed people who knew the truth and were willing to speak it. His first stop was the school. Lincoln Elementary and High School was a small building that served the entire county. Inside, he found Ms. Rebecca Harper, the guidance counsellor, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and the no-nonsense demeanour of someone who'd seen too much. Mr. Caldwell, she said after he introduced himself, Noah's father, I wondered if I'd ever meet you. I need to know about my son's school attendance, his grades, how he's doing. Miss Harper's expression grew troubled. Perhaps we should discuss this in my office. Once the door was closed, she pulled out a file that was frustratingly thin. Noah is an interesting case, brilliant boy, tests off the charts when he's here, but his attendance is sporadic at best. What do you mean sporadic? He misses 2 or 3 days a week, sometimes more. The family always has excuses. He's needed on the ranch, he's sick, he's attending to family business. We've sent letters, made calls, but legally, as long as the absences are excused by the parents. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. What about his physical condition? Have you noticed anything? Miss Harper hesitated, then sighed. Off the record, that boy is often tired, underfed, and frequently has cuts or bruises he explains away as ranch accidents. I've reported my concerns to the appropriate authorities multiple times, but without concrete evidence of abuse. What would constitute concrete evidence? Documentation, witnesses, medical records, something that couldn't be explained away as normal ranch life. She leaned forward. Mr. Caldwell, if you're thinking what I think you're thinking, be very careful. The Whitmores are respected in this community. Mark's family has been here for generations. You're an outsider who abandoned his child for 10 years. Who do you think people will believe? The words stung because they were true. But Ethan was done being the absent father. I need to know, are there others who've seen what's happening to Noah? Talk to Cyrus Blackwood. He's worked at the ranch longer than anyone, and Dr. Emily Chen at the medical clinic might have records if Noah's been treated for any of his accidents. Ethan found Cyrus mending a fence on the far end of the ranch property. The old man saw him coming and looked around nervously before speaking. "You came back," Cyrus said simply. "You told me to check the barn. I did. And my son is sleeping in a storage room like an animal, working like a slave, missing school to fix your damn fences." Ethan's voice was raw with anger. "How long has this been going on?" Cyrus's weathered face crumpled. "Too long. Started maybe 3 years ago, when the boy hit his growth spurt and could do real work. Mark said he needed to learn responsibility. Rachel, she just goes along with whatever Mark wants these days. 3 years? He's been living like this for 3 years and no one said anything. Who was I going to tell? I'm just a ranch hand. Mark pays my salary. And that boy, he never complains, never asks for help, just does what he's told and draws his pictures when he thinks no one's watching." Cyrus's voice dropped. "It breaks my heart, Mr. Caldwell. That's a good boy. Deserves better than this. Help me document what's happening. Help me save my son." The old man nodded slowly. "I got a phone with a camera. Been thinking about using it for a while now. Just needed someone to give me the courage." Dr. Emily Chen was a young physician who'd moved to the rural area straight out of residency. Her clinic was small but modern, and her records were meticulous. "I can't give you specific medical information," she said carefully after Ethan explained why he was there. "But I can tell you that a 15-year-old boy matching your son's description has been treated here 7 times in the past 2 years for various injuries." "What kind of injuries?" "Cuts requiring stitches, a sprained wrist, bruised ribs, a mild concussion, always explained as ranch accidents, always accompanied by Mark Whitmore, never the mother, and—" She hesitated. "What?" The boy was always reluctant to explain exactly how the injuries occurred, and he was consistently underweight for his age and height. I recommended better nutrition and rest, but— She shrugged helplessly. "Ethan rented a cabin on the outskirts of town, a place where he could watch the ranch without being seen. Cyrus had given him the layout, shown him the blind spots where ranch security cameras couldn't reach. And over the next week, Ethan documented a horror show. Noah's Day started at 4:30 a.m., when he'd stumble out of the barn to feed the cattle before anyone in the house was awake. The boy moved like an old man, clearly in pain, clearly exhausted. He'd work for 2 hours before heading to the house for what Ethan assumed was breakfast, though through his binoculars he could see Noah was usually given just coffee and maybe a piece of toast. If Noah went to school at all, he'd return home to more work, mucking stalls, hauling feed, repairing equipment. Work that would challenge a grown man, being done by a boy who should have been playing video games or worrying about math tests. The worst was the evenings. While Mark's biological daughter got help with homework at the kitchen table, Noah would disappear back to the barn with a sandwich and a thermos of water. That was dinner, alone in a cold barn with farm equipment and cattle for company. Cyrus began secretly photographing and videotaping the worst of it. Noah limping as he carried 50-pound feed sacks. Noah working in the rain without proper gear while the family stayed warm and dry inside. Noah eating his meager meals sitting on a hay bale, looking so alone it could break your heart. But the breaking point came during the annual harvest festival. The whole town turned out for the celebration. Families in matching outfits, children running around with cotton candy and balloons, the high school marching band playing patriotic songs. It should have been magical. It should have been the kind of memory that made small-town childhoods special. Mark and Rachel arrived dressed to the nines, their 7-year-old daughter Emma in a frilly dress and patent leather shoes. They looked like the perfect family, smiling, waving, posing for pictures with other families. The picture of rural American success. But Noah wasn't with them. Ethan drove back to the ranch and found his son exactly where he expected, in the barn, alone, tasked with watching the animals while everyone else celebrated. Noah sat in the doorway, still in his work clothes, listening to the distant sound of music and laughter carried on the wind. The boy had his sketchbook open, working on a new house design by the light of the setting sun. This one was different from the others. It was smaller, simpler, but somehow more detailed, more personal. At the top of the page, in careful handwriting, Noah had written, "A place I belong." Watching his son sit alone while the rest of his family celebrated without him, Ethan felt something break inside his chest. This wasn't just neglect anymore. This wasn't just preferential treatment. This was deliberate cruelty. This was psychological torture designed to make Noah feel worthless, unwanted, forgotten. And it was working. Ethan could see it in the defeated slope of his son's shoulders, in the way he didn't even seem surprised to be left behind, in the acceptance that told a story of years of being treated as less than human. That night, Ethan called his lawyer. "I need you to research custody laws in this state. I need to know what it takes to get an emergency custody order, and I need it yesterday." But before the legal wheels could turn, nature provided the catalyst Ethan needed. The storm hit on a Tuesday night without warning. 1 minute the sky was clear, the next it was unleashing hell on earth. Winds that could topple trees, rain that fell like bullets, lightning that turned night into day every few seconds. Ethan was in his cabin, monitoring the ranch through his binoculars, when he saw Noah dash from the house to the barn. The boy was trying to secure the animals, to make sure they were safe before the worst of the storm hit. It was the kind of dangerous, responsible work that should have been done by adults. But the wind was too strong. A massive gust caught the barn door and slammed it against the wall so hard the whole structure shook. Noah tried to grab it, tried to pull it closed, but he was just one 15-year-old boy against the fury of nature. That's when Ethan saw the wooden beam come loose. It happened in slow motion, the support beam twisting free from the barn roof, falling toward where Noah stood struggling with the door. The boy saw it coming, but couldn't move fast enough. The beam caught him across the shoulder and chest, pinning him to the ground. Ethan was running before he realized he'd moved, sprinting across the field through wind and rain that felt like punishment from God himself. But by the time he reached the barn, Noah had managed to pull himself free and was curled up in the corner, shaking from pain and cold and fear. "Noah, Noah, are you hurt?" His son looked up with eyes that held too much pain for someone so young. "I'm okay, just bruised. I have to get the animals secured before—" "The hell with the animals!" Ethan pulled his son to his feet, checking for broken bones, for blood, for signs of serious injury. "You could have been killed. Mark will be angry if something happens to the cattle." Those words, spoken so matter-of-factly, with such resignation, made Ethan see red. His 15-year-old son was more worried about Mark's anger than his own safety, more concerned about livestock than his own life. "Where is Mark? Where's your mother? Why are you out here alone?" Noah gestured toward the house where every light was on, and Ethan could see figures moving safely behind windows. They're making sure Emma isn't scared. She doesn't like storms. But their other child, their son, was expendable, worth risking in a storm to protect property, worth sacrificing for cattle and feed. Ethan pulled out his phone and started recording, Noah trying to lift a beam that weighed twice what he did. Noah shivering in clothes soaked through from rain. Noah limping but still trying to work, still trying to do his job even though he was clearly in pain. "Come on," Ethan said, wrapping his jacket around his son's shoulders. "We're getting you out of this barn." "I can't leave," Mark said. "I don't give a damn what Mark said. You're coming with me." For the first time in years, Noah didn't argue. He was too cold, too hurt, too tired to fight anymore. He let his father lead him out of that barn and into the rental car, away from the storm and the work and the endless, crushing responsibility that no child should carry. That night, in the warm cabin, Ethan watched his son sleep on the couch and made a promise. This ended now. No more negotiations. No more trying to work within the system. No more being reasonable with people who had systematically destroyed his child's spirit. The next morning, Ethan walked into the county sheriff's office with a phone full of evidence and a heart full of righteous fury. Sheriff Patricia Valdez was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who'd seen every kind of human ugliness the rural county had to offer. She listened to Ethan's story without interruption, watched his videos without comment, and studied his photographs with the careful attention of someone who understood that lives hung in the balance. "This is extensive," she said finally. "It's 3 years of systematic abuse documented in 1 week. God knows what I would have found if I'd been looking longer. Mr. Caldwell, I have to ask, where have you been for the past 10 years? The question hit like a physical blow, but Ethan took it. Building a business, making money, being a selfish bastard who thought success was more important than family. I have no excuse for abandoning my son, but I'm here now, and I'm not leaving without him." Sheriff Valdez nodded slowly. "I'm going to send Deputy Morales with you to conduct a welfare check. If what you're telling me is accurate, we'll be filing charges and removing the child from that environment immediately." The drive back to the ranch felt like riding to war. Deputy Maria Morales was a young officer with the serious demeanor of someone who took child protection very seriously. She'd reviewed Ethan's evidence, and her jaw had grown tighter with each photograph. "How did nobody report this?" she asked as they pulled into the ranch driveway. "Who was going to report it? The school counselor tried. The doctor documented her concerns. The ranch hand was afraid for his job. And Noah..." Ethan's voice cracked. Noah thought he deserved it, thought this was normal. Mark Whitmore came out of the house as they approached, his face immediately hostile when he saw the police car. "What's this about?" "We're here to conduct a welfare check on Noah Caldwell," Deputy Morales announced. "We have reports that he may be living in unsafe conditions." "That's ridiculous. Noah's fine. He's a healthy teenage boy who helps out around the ranch. There's nothing unsafe about learning responsibility." "Where is he now?" Ethan asked. "School, of course." "It's 6 p.m. on a Wednesday," Deputy Morales pointed out. "School ended hours ago." Mark's story changed immediately. "He's doing chores. We run a working ranch here. Everyone contributes." "We'd like to see him. Now." They found Noah in the barn, exactly where Ethan knew he would be. The boy was trying to lift a hay bale that was clearly too heavy for him, his face pale with effort and pain. When he saw the police officer, fear flashed across his features. Not fear of being saved, but fear of getting in trouble. Deputy Morales took one look at Noah, thin, dirty, favoring his left shoulder from the previous night's injury, and her expression hardened. "Son, I'm Deputy Morales. I need to ask you some questions about where you live and how you're treated here. Is this your bedroom?" She gestured to the corner of the barn where Noah's makeshift bed was still visible. The thin blanket, the flat pillow, the notebook full of dream houses sitting beside a bucket that served as a nightstand. Noah glanced toward the house where Mark was watching through a window, then back at the deputy. It's fine. I like it out here. How often do you sleep in the barn? Every night, but it's okay, it's quiet. And your meals? Do you eat with the family? Another glance toward the house. Sometimes, usually I eat out here. It's easier. Deputy Morales knelt down to Noah's eye level. Honey, I need you to tell me the truth. Has anyone hurt you? Has anyone made you do work that you couldn't handle? Noah's eyes filled with tears he wouldn't let fall. I'm strong. I can handle it. That's not what I asked. For a long moment, the barn was silent, except for the sound of cattle moving in their stalls. Then Noah whispered, I just want to go to school. I want to learn about architecture and building houses where families are happy. But there's always so much work. It was the most heartbreaking thing Ethan had ever heard. His son didn't even know how to ask for help, didn't know how to say he was being abused. He'd been conditioned to believe that his suffering was normal, that his dreams were selfish, that his needs didn't matter. Noah, Deputy Morales said gently, what would you say if I told you that 15-year-old boys are supposed to sleep in beds, not barns? That they're supposed to go to school every day and have time for homework and friends and hobbies? That they're supposed to be taken care of, not used for labor? Noah's face crumpled. I would say that sounds really nice. That was it. That was all Deputy Morales needed to hear. Mr. Whitmore, she called toward the house, I need you to come out here immediately. The confrontation that followed was ugly. Mark tried to justify everything. The barn sleeping arrangement was building character. The missed school days were practical education. The excessive labor was learning responsibility. Rachel stood behind him, wringing her hands, offering weak excuses about how Noah preferred the barn, how he was difficult to manage, how they were doing their best. But Deputy Morales had seen enough. She documented the living conditions, photographed the makeshift bedroom, recorded Noah's answers to her questions. And when Mark started getting aggressive, started shouting about outside interference and family business, she'd heard enough too. Mr. Whitmore, I'm placing Noah Caldwell in protective custody pending a full investigation into his living conditions and treatment. Mr. Caldwell, as his biological father, do you have a safe place for Noah to stay? Yes, absolutely yes. Then Noah, I need you to pack whatever belongings you want to take with you. Noah looked around the barn that had been his prison for 3 years. He picked up his sketchbook, tucked his small tool belt into his backpack, and looked at the wooden toy car Ethan had left on a hay bale. You made this for me, Noah said softly. 10 years too late, but you made it. Noah tucked the car into his pocket. That's what matters. As they walked toward the car together, Noah suddenly stopped and ran back to the barn. He emerged a moment later with a single sheet of paper, his latest house design, the one titled, A Place I Belong. I want to show you something, he said to his father. I designed this last night. It's not very big, but it has a real bedroom with a window, and a kitchen where people eat together, and a living room where families talk to each other. He paused, looking up at Ethan with eyes that held hope for the first time in years. Do you think we could build something like this someday? Ethan's throat was so tight he could barely speak. Yeah, kiddo. I think we can build exactly that. The legal proceedings that followed were swift and decisive. Ms. Harper testified about Noah's poor attendance and physical condition. Dr. Chen presented her medical records documenting repeated injuries. Cyrus Blackwood took the stand and, in his quiet, dignified way, told the truth about what he'd witnessed over the past 3 years. But it was Noah's architectural drawings that sealed the case. Page after page of houses designed by a boy who dreamed of belonging somewhere, Houses with big windows, so no one feels trapped. Houses with family rooms, where everyone sits together. Houses with gardens, where kids can play safely. Each drawing was evidence of a child who understood what a loving home should look like, because he'd been denied one for so long. The judge, an elderly woman named Margaret Stone, who'd presided over family court for 20 years, looked at those drawings for a long time before speaking. In all my years on this bench, I've seen many cases of child abuse and neglect, but rarely have I seen evidence that so clearly illustrates a child's need for safety, stability, and unconditional love. This boy has been systematically isolated, exploited, and emotionally abandoned by the very people who should have protected him. She granted Ethan emergency custody that same day. Walking out of that courthouse with Noah beside him, Ethan felt like he could breathe for the first time in 10 years. His son was safe, his son was his again, and this time he wasn't going to screw it up. 1 month later, they stood together in the backyard of the house Ethan had rented in town. It wasn't much, a small ranch-style home with 3 bedrooms and a big kitchen, but it had potential. It had room for dreams. Noah had gained 12 pounds and grown 2 inches. He went to school every day now, where he was already excelling in math and science and art. He'd made friends with kids who didn't understand why he knew so much about cattle feed and fence repair, but who accepted his quiet intensity and his dreams of becoming an architect. "What do you think about here?" Ethan asked, pointing to a sunny spot near the back fence. "For the oak tree." For the oak tree. They'd bought the sapling together at the local nursery, a white oak that would grow tall and strong and live for generations. Noah had chosen it because oak trees are good for building tree houses in, and Ethan had realized his son was planning a future that included children of his own someday. Children who would be loved and protected and never, ever forgotten. As they dug the hole together, working side by side in comfortable silence, Noah suddenly spoke. "Dad, yeah? I used to dream about you coming back. Even when I was really little and didn't understand why you left, I would dream about you driving up to the ranch and taking me away somewhere safe." He paused, patting soil around the base of the young tree. "I stopped dreaming about it when I got older. Started thinking maybe it was babyish to want that." Ethan's hands stilled on his shovel. "What made you stop believing I'd come back? Mark used to say you didn't want me, that you had a new life and I wasn't part of it. And Mom, she never disagreed with him." Noah's voice was matter-of-fact, but Ethan could hear the old hurt underneath. "After a while, I figured it was probably true." The words hit harder than any physical blow could have. His son had spent years believing he was unwanted, unloved, forgotten. And the worst part was, it had been partially true. Ethan had chosen his business over his family, had chosen money over the child who needed him most. "Noah, I need you to understand something. The biggest mistake of my entire life was not fighting for you 10 years ago. Not calling, not visiting, not being the father you deserved." He set down his shovel and looked his son in the eyes. "But you were never unwanted. You were never forgotten. You were always loved, even when I was too selfish and stupid to show it properly." Noah nodded, but there was still uncertainty in his expression. "So you're not going to leave again, even when I mess up or get in the way, or—" "Noah." Ethan's voice was firm, final. "I am never leaving you again. Not for business, not for money, not for anything. You are my son, and you are the most important thing in my world. Period." That night, as Ethan tucked Noah into his real bed in his real room, a room with windows and clean sheets and a desk for homework and walls where architectural drawings were taped up like treasures, his son said something that made his heart stop. "I drew a new house today." "Yeah, what's special about this one?" Noah pulled out his sketchbook and showed his father the latest drawing. It was smaller than his usual designs, simpler, but somehow more detailed than anything he'd done before. A modest two-story home with a wraparound porch, big windows, and a tree in the front yard. But it was the title that made Ethan's eyes fill with tears. Our first home. I was thinking, Noah said sleepily, maybe someday we could actually build it. Not just dream about it, but really build it. Together. Ethan smoothed his son's hair back from his forehead. I think that sounds perfect. We'll design it together, build it together, and fill it with all the love I should have given you years ago. And Dad? Yeah? Will you promise me something? Anything. Promise me that no matter how big or successful we get, no matter how much money we make or how busy life gets, promise me we'll never forget that the most important thing is just being together. Ethan kissed his son's forehead and whispered the words he should have said years ago. I promise you'll never be forgotten again. Not by me, not by anyone. You are loved, you are wanted, and you belong here with me, always. As he turned off the light and left Noah's room, Noah's real room, in their real home, where his son would sleep safely and dream of the future they would build together, Ethan felt something he hadn't experienced in a decade. Peace. It had taken losing everything to find the only thing that mattered. It had taken 10 years of emptiness to understand what fullness really meant. It had taken almost losing his son forever to realize that no business empire, no amount of money, no professional success could ever compare to the simple, profound joy of being Noah's father. And as he sat in his own room, looking out at the small oak tree they'd planted together, Ethan made a new promise to himself. He would spend the rest of his life making sure Noah knew he was loved. He would be present for every school play, every homework assignment, every teenage crisis, every moment of joy and growth and discovery. He would be the father Noah had always deserved, finally, completely, forever. Because some mistakes can be forgiven, some relationships can be rebuilt, some damage can be healed. And sometimes, if you're lucky enough to get a second chance, you can save the person who matters most, even if that person happens to be your own son, and even if you almost lost him forever to your own selfish blindness. Noah was safe now. Noah was home. And this time, nothing in the world would ever make Ethan leave him behind again. Nothing. If this story of a father's redemption and a son's rescue touched your heart, if it made you think about the children in your own life who need protecting, who need someone to fight for them, who need to know they're loved, then comment 1 below. If you want to hear more stories about families being rebuilt, about second chances, about love conquering neglect and abuse, comment 2. Your voice matters. Your engagement helps us bring these life-changing stories to people who need to hear them. Because somewhere out there, there's another Noah sleeping in a barn. Another child who's been forgotten, overlooked, treated as less than human by the very people who should protect them. And somewhere out there, maybe there's another Ethan, someone who has the power to save that child but doesn't know it yet. Someone who needs to hear this story to understand that it's never too late to come home. Never too late to fight for what matters most. Never too late to love the way you should have loved from the very beginning.